Welcome back, and it's now time for us to get into a bit of politics and just understand what happened yesterday and what you should be expecting in the coming days. Welcome to the program. This is Eye on Politics. It's now over. It's now official. We have got President in waiting now, President-elect. That is Dr. William Ruto, to be sworn in next week on Tuesday as per the Constitution. And today we just want to take a look. Let's just go back a bit and see what happened as Kenyans waited for that Supreme Court ruling which happened yesterday. And with me in studio I have got Senior Counsel Eliud, Ngugi. I said Senior Counsel and he laughed. Why Senior Counsel? Is there a sense of hierarchy? There's a lawyer, there's an advocate, counsel and Senior Counsel. What's the difference?
The difference is that, thank you for having me first. The difference is that Senior Counsel is someone who has done something exemplary in the legal profession. And so they have either become, been the best teachers of the law, or they have been the best litigators, or they have gone to court and actually stood out and represented people, or they have actually done something notable even in government. So for example, the former Vice President, Kalonzo Musyoka, is a Senior Counsel, having been a Vice President of this country. And so that's Senior Counsel. But then we have what we say...
Counsel is a general term.
Counsel is a general term, which is derived from the term counselor. Because most of what lawyers do is they give advice. Yes. So they become counsels. So that's the meaning for counsels.
Someone has been asking me what's the difference between an advocate of the High Court and a lawyer.
An advocate of the High Court is someone who has beyond going to study law in the university. They have spent 1 year at the Kenya School of Law, and after 1 year they have also gone through something we call pupillage, or gone under a master and studied also the practical ways of practicing law. So after that, then they request, which we say they petition the Chief Justice to be admitted to the bar. And so they wear the wig and you swear, you take an oath and say that you will uphold at all times the rule of law. And so that's an advocate. But then a lawyer is someone who has studied law, so they have a degree in law.
What am I?
You are a journalist.
All right, I'm a senior journalist. All right. Thank you so much. I think it's good to verify that, because we've been in that week of legal jargons and legal matters, which is also good for the country. We learn on a daily basis. Okay, so a lot happened yesterday. Let's just go back to what happened in the Supreme Court. And all the 7-judge bench made a unanimous decision. Was this quite common, that all the judges had the same thought and they said, this is our unanimous decision?
No, it's not, because in most of the hearings, and even previously, we've had judges who have dissented or who have disagreed with one another. So you have one dissenting and one making the rest making unanimous decision. And so for this to have happened yesterday, where it was an unanimous judgment that they all agreed on the issues, I believe then that goes into the case in itself, that probably the case was or rather the petitioners did not present enough evidence. And from that, then that lack of presentation of a substantive case that required some judges to agree with them, then that meant that then they all disagreed with the petitioners who had come requesting that the case be, or rather the election be annulled.
Yes. But is it common? Is it usual?
It's not common. In most cases, you find at least one person disagreeing with the rest of the judges. And so that basically means that they agree that maybe, like in this previous petition that it was in the Supreme Court, they were saying that probably the election was not properly done.
Yes.
Or rather that the system, the KIMS kit and other technology that we use for election was not as specified by the law. So we should have found some agreeing and saying, actually, the technology that we have taken in our Kenyan election process is no longer matching up with the law. It's not helping us have transparent and verifiable elections. Yeah.
And I think this one also reminds me, I think it was DCJ Mwilu who said that now moving forward, advocates should look at the weight of the cases they present to the court. I don't know whether that was based on the ruling, because that statement came after the ruling. So in their remarks, that it was now going back to the advocates and the lawyers now to look at the weight of the cases they present before the courts. This perhaps looks to be a standard that has been set at the Supreme Court.
Yeah, yes, but also I think also what I heard the Deputy Chief Justice saying is that she admires how the lawyers believed in their client's case, which basically meant, in my interpretation, that the Deputy Chief Justice and the other members of that bench of judges have been following through the information, have been present have been following the news and following up every information that has been relayed out there. And so they knew and they were keen and they knew what was happening on the ground. And then the lawyers came in and they believed in what their clients wanted. And they tried convincing them otherwise, away from what they had been seeing, the issues which were present on the ground. And so that's what basically she was saying, that I see you're very passionate in believing your client's cause, because that's what they did. They believed in their client's cause. And that's what we are required as professionals to do. If you come to me, I need to believe in your cause and I need to fight for your justice. Yes.
In terms of standard, we see all the 9 petitions which were condensed or suppressed or consolidated, for that matter, all dismissed. In terms of standard that has been set by the Supreme Court, what would you say, even for the future litigations that might come up, from the subsequent elections?
It basically means that the Supreme Court is trying to, what they're doing is, they have, one, set up the standard very high. They have raised the bar on how we should be able to challenge some election issues. Yes. That you need to produce proper evidence. You need to actually take proper evidence, not just from maybe a few polling stations, but probably it needs to be very convincing. Beyond reasonable doubt is the term we use. That's the standard they want.
But someone would argue that time was not enough for that to happen.
Well, the time may not have been.
You'd imagine you want to get an evidence from Lagdera or from Moyale or some corner in Nyalgunga, in that deep in Homa Bay County. I don't know. Time is of the essence here?
Time is of the essence, but I think that's why, again, there was a whole battery of lawyers and researchers in different teams to help with, for example, I think there was something about IBC having 56 lawyers. And this number of lawyers basically meant that they had to go through their materials. And so if you have a huge number of assistants, probably you're able to actually bring this evidence in court. And so if you get 200 of them, you'll be able to actually raise a very serious case, and you'll be able to actually follow through the timeline given, the 14 days given for you to actually present your case. But also, the judgment may have, the judgment may have seemed like it actually agreed, or rather threw out the case for the petitioners. Yes. But what we may also need to look into is the fact that this judgment clarified some issues So, for example, the issue to do with the commission in itself, whereby the case was whether the chairperson has the right to tally, or is the sole person who should tally the final,
yes.
the
final results of the presidential results.
Presidential results. That issue was able to be clarified, and they said, although we do not agree that he does not have a power to be the one to verify and tally the presidential election results, each commissioner also is meant to participate in the whole process. And so, in such a manner, the Supreme Court yesterday actually clarified on that issue, which has been very controversial, and members of the public were wondering who is who. And so, although they agreed that it's not the chairman who might have even done the tallying in itself at Bomas, then they were able to uphold and say, we do not see anything wrong because the other 4 commissioners did not present a watertight case on the disputes in the commission. And also the chairman did not speak about the disputes in itself.
And we talk about chairman, he actually said that he's been vindicated. He's been vindicated, and by and large, IEBC.
Yes.
In 2017, he was a victim. He was indicted again this time around. But he must be a happy man going on retirement, having all these accusations leveled against him off his table.
Well, he is, and I believe there is also state security that comes with that job. Because, number one, if maybe the elections are overturned, or rather nullified, what that would have meant would have been that the chairperson did not do his work. But the fact that they upheld that declaration that he made as a chairperson, which is the authority that was actually bestowed upon him to just declare the results, then that means that he is a happy man because what he did was not an illegality, as was prayed by the petitioners in their petition.
Yes.
They had said that he committed an offense by declaring someone who may not have met the 50+1 standard that is set out in the elections law. Yes.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we still have got so much more to talk about, including we want to go through one by one all the 9 points, just to understand how the judges came to conclusion and dismiss all the 9 petitions in yesterday's ruling. So let's take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It's People and Politics. Earlier on I said Iron Politics. People and Politics being on a Tuesday. Wakili Ngugi is still with me in studio. So Wakili, a lot happened, and let's just go back to what happened in the courts. What really stood out for you yesterday, you know, the whole process until the last beat of that judgment?
What stood out for me was how the judges made sure that all the presentations were done on time or within the given time, and they also ensured that that each party was given the actual time they were supposed to present or to make their submissions. But also the fact that the judgment yesterday was delivered. They had said that all parties should be in court by noon.
Yes.
And I believe by 2 p.m., the judgment had already been delivered, which we know rarely happens in other instances where you find that the judgment is delivered later in the day.
Yeah.
So that was something that stood out. The presentation also by the senior counsels was also very something admirable, especially for young lawyers to actually learn, because they presented in a very in a manner that showed that they had done the research in a persuasive way, and also they added other factors of literature into it, the poetry into it, and so and analogies, biblical references, and so they were able to paint the different pictures and to be able to be very convincing, and so that stood out for me, and especially former AG Professor Given Muigai's opening statement.
Yes. I'm quite interested in understanding how the whole political landscape will be formed moving forward, because from the judgment, all the 7 petitions, it means that the president-elect now has a clean slate to start afresh his government. Of course, the petitioner went to court, he's been vindicated, but then the legal background and even that heavy cloud of going to court and what have you, he really talked about the judicial independence. How do you think now all these other independent bodies now will start to transact their business devoid of any interference from any other quarter?
The example was already set yesterday by the judiciary. I believe they set out an example of the independence. You could hear the deputy CJ mention after, at the end of the judgment, mentioned that they were sorry not to have picked some phone calls from throughout the weekend because they were busy. But they are sorry and they apologize for that. And I think she was making reference to maybe some influence that may have happened, or some people who are trying to reach them and maybe try and find out how the verdict will be. And so just by that, I believe the rest of the commissions also, and from what the current, or rather the president-elect said, that now these commissions and everybody should not be afraid of doing their work. It's a very strong statement, and I believe the reason why we have independent bodies in this country is to make sure that there's an issue to do with watching one another, making sure that we keep each other accountable. And so if each commission and each institution does that, what that will mean is that at the end of the day, institutions will be accountable, institutions will perform their mandate as per the Constitution, and moving forward then, no one is going to be afraid of actually doing their work. We're going to be sure that if I perform my task, and if I do not perform my task, especially if I perform my task, let's say a commission like the EACC, if they perform their task, nobody is going to be afraid of the aftermath, or there will be no intimidation, etc.
We had several, words from the judges. Watertight cases should be presented before court, hot air, wild good chase, and etc., etc. How heavy should a case be before it's presented before a court of law? In this case, the Supreme Court.
Any case should be able to meet the standards set out by the law. We have an Evidence Act that prescribes how you should go about collecting your evidence. We have a civil procedure which goes about talking about how you should, for example, swear an affidavit. And we had some lawyers being actually mentioned or being warned for actually committing what we say perjury, because they ended up swearing affidavits on behalf of their client, which is not allowed in law. And so any case should be able to follow those, the evidence procedure collection. And so if you are going to challenge any issue, if you have even beyond elections petitions, even in civil and criminal cases, there is a procedure set out there for collection. And for you to be able to win a case, then you need to have a proper evidence. You need to have gone through your evidence, but also there is a standard set for the presentation of evidence. And in elections petitions, that standard is above the balance of probability, but not beyond reasonable doubt. And so if you understand that standard that has already been set, then you should be able to actually look for evidence that is above the standard of proof, which is basically you need to get evidence that can convince the court that actually whatever claim that you're making is actually true and it actually happened, and from that happening of that event, then it may have affected the results. And that's what the election standard is, that they are actually trying to ask you to actually prove that maybe whatever you're claiming, for example, in this previous petition, that they were claiming that there was interception with the transmission of the results, then the examples that maybe should have been given should have been more than the two that were maybe made in court by my senior Julie Soweto. They should have been able to pick several stations, not just those two, in Mount Elgon and in, I believe, Moranga. We should have been able to pick maybe 7 or 10. Yes.
I'm looking at a situation where in the near future we'll have Kenya's democracy and we'll be having elections after every 5 years. Of course, the bar has been set by the Supreme Court. The judges are looking at tangible evidence, something that can convince them. But I'm also looking at a situation where lawyers will also have to go back to the drawing board and convince the judges in terms of the collection of evidence they have. I'm wondering what would happen if an advocate or a lawyer would want to stand for his client in the next election. Based on what we saw yesterday, all of the evidence, all the petitions were quashed, were dismissed. Do you think now lawyers will be ready to stand for their clients in the next election?
Lawyers will be...
In case there's a petition, not next election, that would be preemptive.
Lawyers should be able to actually represent their clients because it's an obligation, it's a duty for one to be able to represent a client. But what comes out of what maybe we need to, and maybe I'm turning a bit political, is that maybe we need to be honest with our clients. We need to tell our clients that either you have a strong case or you have a weak case. We need to actually have such conversations before proceeding on.
Yes.
Not every, and I think that's what came out yesterday, not every election should actually be challenged at the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Not every case is worth taking to the Supreme Court. So we need to get to that place, and I think we're getting there, whereby we will be able to say, no, the election was actually a bit fair. We have improved in the way we transmitted our results. There was transparency. We need to get to that place where we are able to do that. And so from the happenings of yesterday, then the lawyers and even the clients, I believe, are now able to know when to go to court and when to actually sit back and accept the results.
Yeah. It's now over, and the Assumption of Office Committee is now at work. Swearing in is next week on Tuesday. In your own, let's get political a bit. What do you think is now is in place for the deputy president, who is now president-elect? The moment he'll take oath of office, what do you think is ahead of him in his plate?
I think what's on his plate once he assumes office, I believe on Wednesday morning, when he shows up at work, but he's already in office because he's already receiving security briefs every morning.
Right.
I believe the first thing is to actually set up his cabinet, because he cannot be a one-man show. And so the next thing that he's going to do is to actually come up with a cabinet, because the other cabinet has to go home, and he has his people who probably he believes will be able to help him deliver on his mandate. And from there, then he needs to ensure that the promises that they made together with his deputy president, the promises they made above the bottom up, Mama Mboga and Boda Boda Rider, fertilizer for the farmers, all those things that they said are fulfilled.
Yes.
Lowering the cost of living is something that is very urgent, and people are waiting to see what he's about to do to lower the price, especially of unga, from the 200 shillings to something affordable. So I believe those are some of the things that he needs to do. Probably by Friday next week, he needs to do something that will be able to restore some hope.
Yes.
But even beyond that, I had a very interesting moment listening to some international news yesterday, where they were recapping about the Kenyan election, and it sounded very good to be a Kenyan. I was very proud to be a Kenyan at that moment, because the other African countries were being interviewed, and they were speaking very highly of our democracy as a country. And I believe the international countries are also watching.
Yeah.
And if they are watching and they saw how we conducted ourselves, we were peaceful, we did not demonstrate, we have accepted the results, and we have already gone back to work. What that means is basically that the international community is ready to bring their goodies here in this country. So I expect investors to come in. I can see that the stock market has actually...
Yeah, it showed up yesterday. It's performing pretty well.
It has improved. And so even beyond the local engagement and the local economy, whereby the president-elect will be in charge from next week, I believe then there will be international investors who will be reaching out to us, ready to offer us business, ready to bring money into this country for us to actually create these employment opportunities. So it's a good thing.
It's a good thing. He's coming into office, and we are hitting around 12 trillion. This must be something. Should it worry him?
It should worry him, but again, we need not forget that confession by the outgoing president, where he said that we lose 2 billion shillings every day. So, and this 2 billion shillings is lost through corruption. And so if the incoming president is able to block the leakages that are coming with this loss of money, then I believe that within a very short time, we should be able to clear up our debt as a country. From that, we should be able to clear that if they go ahead and actually work on for example, the farmers, and make sure that we create a market for the export market. Then the farmers are going to export, we are going to have more money, we'll be able to pay more tax, and we are going to pay back our loan.
I would imagine the expectation from the common Mwananchi, because, you know, even Azimio, when they were going about, you know, campaigns, they had the manifesto, they had the agenda set for the country, and Dr. William Ruto is now the president-elect. He must be able to deliver as per the pledges he made and the expectation from to the Mwananchi. Let me just get your point on this. Pledging is one thing and actualization is another. What do you think is going, or what do you think it will take him to start actualizing the manifestos, the pledges, the promises one by one within a span of 5 years?
I think what it will take him is basically being able to, one, the team he puts in place really will determine whether he's able to deliver on his mandate, because he said that the Big Four was one of his projects. For example, if he gets a proper minister for who will be in charge of that, and they're able to oversee that, then that pledge will actually be seen through. If he is able to make sure that also he engages the international community, he's able to speak to other presidents out there and organizations, international organizations, then that would mean that he's able to deliver on most of his pledge. But also we know him as one, he does not drink, and he's an early riser as a president. He has been an early riser as a deputy president. And so for him, what we expect to see is for him to be always out there early in the morning, in his office and getting his briefs and able to actually push the people around him. And so if you are elected to be maybe in Kenya Kwanza and he's your leader, we expect him to actually lead by example as a president. And from that, we will be able to see a lot of changes in the country. Yeah.
So you imagine you have a president who is up by 3:30 and you wake up in the morning, you find him in his office and you appear for a meeting at 9. You would imagine how, you'd be embarrassed as a minister.
Yes.
Let me get it this way. How would you describe the kind of leadership that you'd want to see moving forward?
I think the kind of leadership we would like to see as a country moving forward is a kind of leadership where, one, they respect the independency of the different institutions. And so...
Which even President Kenyatta said yesterday.
Yes.
Yes.
So, but we need to see it happen in actualized, whereby if there is a court order, for example, issued by the judiciary, stopping maybe an appointment of ministers or CASs, then we expect that the government of the day is going to respect that independence. You remember there was a list of 6 judges that was actually presented, or not appointed, but among the 40s that were presented to the outgoing president. We expect to see that probably that this time round, as President Ruto assumes office next week, he's able to actually appoint the 6 remaining judges, that they are able to proceed to do their work. We expect to see a leadership that is accountable, that is able to come back and say, we were able to collect X amount of money from our taxes, and this is what we have done. We have delivered on this, and this is within the range. There has been no corruption. We expect to see actually people who engage in corruption deals being put to jail, whereby if there's a corruption report that is out there, the Kenya would like to see is a Kenya whereby those guys are arraigned in court. They are brought to court, and there's a watertight case from the DCI and DPP. They actually collect enough evidence, and so at the end of it all, we get some of these corrupt members put in prison. So I expect that's the kind of Kenya I would like to see going forward.
Let's talk briefly about Raila Odinga. It was his 5th stab at the top seat, and he didn't clinch it. What next for Honorable Raila Odinga?
Raila Odinga, former Prime Minister, is a magnanimous leader. He is a statesman. And going forward, I believe, and actually a conversation I was having with a friend of mine, I would expect that he will attend the inauguration. He will be able to go back and maybe even address the media, because we only saw
he's not spoken
a media report being sent out there. But we expect that he will show up, address the media together with his wife, together with his running mate, and other members of his team, and they're able to say that they respect the decision of the Supreme Court, and also he would like to thank his running mate and the rest of the members of his team, and going forward, that he's able to actually move to this position that he deserves as a statesman, that he's able to continue addressing the goodwill, preaching peace in this country. Even beyond the Kenyan border, he's able to go to Africa, some of the African countries, and preach peace. And so his work is not yet done as a statesman, but he's able to also continue pushing for transparency and for accountability from President Ruto's leadership. But he will continue pushing for that democracy, whereby he's going to make them answer to some of their dealings. So he keeps the Ruto's government into check, and expect him to actually even raise an opposition leader who is able to actually keep pushing the government to account for everything. So I expect him to be around, not to actually go home and retire and go quiet.
What if he retires? Let me just speaking what you say. I'm done with this. Kenyans can now push the rest. I've done my bit.
If he decides to retire, well and good. But we intend
I was waiting for that but, yeah.
We intend to see some of his close friends reporting and speaking on his behalf. So it's not yet done. Even if he goes home, he goes quiet, we expect to see that some of his close allies, like Junet Mohammed or Atwoli, and the likes of Tuju and these other people close to him, that they'll be able to continue speaking and actually saying that this is not what Raila Odinga would have wanted. So that's what we expect. Yes.
There's a situation where you've correctly put it that you don't expect Honorable Raila Odinga to retire and leave the political scene yet. The aspect of having 6 million voters behind him and President-elect William Ruto has 7 million people, you'd imagine that he's still a force to reckon with?
He is still a force to reckon with. He still he has a following. We cannot ignore that. He has a huge following. We are all Kenyans. And I believe that even as President-elect comes into power, it does not mean that he's going to forget the 7 or 6 million people who did not vote for him. We expect that he will continue being a leader who is a Kenyan leader. So some of the things and the promises that were in the Azimio's manifesto, that President-elect is able to actually look into them, offer. He's also not expected to actually leave out some regions of this country, but he's able to actually visit Bondo, visit Siaya, visit Mombasa, and become a president for everybody. So it's a force to reckon with, and that's why I'm also saying that Honorable Raila Odinga still has some work to do. He still has to keep this government to account.
We've talked about the politicians, but the Kenyan voter who kept peace, who went to the ballot, well, there were court proceedings left, right, and center, but that Kenyan kept peace, and at the end of the day, they said, it's a done deal, turudi kazi. What do you talk about that Kenyan?
I think that Kenyan is very mature. He has come to age. He has learned that, yes, we all have preferences. And that Kenyan is able to say, you know what, I have done my duty, I have gone to the ballot, and I now leave the institutions to do their work. And if the institutions and the rest of the Kenyans have a different opinion from mine, then I respect that. And so that Kenya is very respectable. He respects his neighbor. He is also very forward-thinking because he's looking at the future. And he seems to see that if he goes to the streets or if he decides to be overly get excited and not consider his other friend who may not be happy, that he's able to see that that affects his future. Because if we go back to what happened in 2007, they say in Swahili that when two bulls are fighting, the grass is the one that suffers. And so he's able to see that he's the one who suffers when he actually take the position of his leaders to heart, and they fight, and that fight ends up hurting him because it hurts his source of bread and his source of unga. And so that's a very mature Kenyan.
So where was this Kenyan missing the mark in the past then? Because you talked so good about that Kenyan who this time around matured, but what was happening to that Kenyan in the past?
I think that Kenyan had not seen what would be of his behavior in 2007. But he saw what is likely to happen if he actually decides to listen to what a politician tells him. And so this Kenyan is now a bit mature. He has experience from the past, and I think the past is a very good teacher because it teaches you about the future. And so that's what that Kenyan was lacking then, and now has. He has the experience from the past. And so I hope we continue as Kenyans, continue remembering the past and improving on our behavior in the future, and that we get to a place whereby we even hug each other and celebrate whatever the outcome comes out. We're able to hug each other and say, you know what, he's also my president. Or, you know what, we still have to move on as Kenyans.
Just before we take a break, there is that bit of politics in Kenya being so tough and either do or die. Did you see that this time around? Because a majority of politicians who lost conceded and, peacefully said, I'm done with this.
I saw that, but then I think it's our, again, democracy, our electoral system maturing up. And because we were able to see, okay, I've cast my vote. There's a Form 34. It's already being delivered at Bomas. And it's the same Form 34 that my agent signed. And so what else do I have as a politician to do apart from concede defeat and look forward to the future? I think it's a system.
Yes.
When there is transparency, when we can see notable changes, positive changes in our system and in our voting process, then that's encouraging and that's allowing us to actually trust the system.
Yes.
And that's what is happening.
All right. Wakili, let's take a break. And when we come back, I still want us to talk about the numbers. The president talked about it. The president talked about the process and the numbers in his speech yesterday. He also talked about, he did not mention Deputy President William Ruto's name, who's now the president-elect. And then there's this issue of the opinion polls. All through, the deputy president, now the president-elect, was trailing. And after election, what you also. Let's take a break. And coming up, I have got Dr. Barrack Muluka, who is a strategic communicator as well as an advisor, coming on shortly. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Now we are now shifting gears, and as I promised, I have got Daktari Barrack Muluka, strategic communicator and an advisor. He's not new to this. He's just said something that made me wondering. And Daktari, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Victor. I'm happy to be here.
You are here in 1983 in this same studio.
Exactly, straight from the University of Nairobi.
What were you doing here?
I was a producer of programs here in this studio.
Ben, and your job is at stake. Ben, producer, your job is under threat.
And radio next door. This is where we produced Tabule and Franco Luanzo Luambo Makiadi here in 1983, December. We were celebrating 20 years of independence as a country. That's almost 40 years ago today. It's 59 years.
You are here?
So 39 years ago I was here. And we were producing programs here. Yeah? And it was wonderful. Okay. But you people have now beautified the place. It looks really good.
.com. I don't know what kind of, whatever you are using, the equipment.
You see your equipment, it's all electronic. Ours was manual.
Exactly.
So to speak,
the tapes and the reels.
Where you have all these modern day electronic boards and background.
Yeah.
We had the closest was the telecine, the blue screen in the background, and which was very difficult to have. The rest were actually boards which were painted by artists. So congratulations.
We've grown.
Doing a
because
great
when you come
job.
back home and you see an improvement, as a father, you're happy.
Well, I'm very happy. I think the joy of a parent is in looking at the offspring and seeing that they are going somewhere and they are doing better than you have done. Always we should aspire to see that subsequent generations do better than we have done. And that includes in the country, the political things that we are talking about.
And that now drives me to the point of our discussion, Dr. because it's a very interesting point to be a Kenyan right now. I don't know what's your take on so far up to where we are today, the 6th day of September.
Yes, allow me also to acknowledge Ngugi,
right,
who began the show with you. It's a pleasure to be with you and to acknowledge the audience out there. I think the country is in a good place. Contrary to some of the fears and apprehensions that we tend to come across and to witness, our country is in a good place, in a very good place, I even dare say. In the year 2010, we promulgated a new constitution, and the new constitution came with many institutions, many pillars that would give us stability, so to speak. The independent bodies, the Supreme Court, the various provisions of the different articles of the Constitution, the various acts of Parliament that have been born out of that Constitution. And these past 12 years, those instruments, institutions have been undergoing testing, testing for stability. And I think that they are proving to be quite stable, quite sound. I was saying off camera to Ngugi here that even the public itself is an institution. The people themselves are an institution. And moments and seasons such as we are going through do put all of us on the weighing scales. And I think we are being found to be completely stable. The rule of law is becoming entrenched. Our faith in ourselves is increasing. Even where the Supreme Court judges say that our levels of doubt and mistrust remain high, they give us the opportunity to test the pillars. The process that has just come to maturity through the Supreme Court was not just a trial of the election process. It was also a trial of the Supreme Court, a trial of the judiciary, its integrity, its stability. And of course, IBC has undergone that test repeatedly. So finally, therefore, Victor, we must remind ourselves that the things we are doing should eventually be collectivized and be passed on to future generations.
Yes.
We are building a country that we are going to pass on to future generations. And if we are passing the test at each and every stage, as we seem to be doing, in spite of the fact that it hurts, in spite of the fact that there is pain, because those who lose hurt, they are human beings. They hurt. The harsh Jew told us that we Jews are also human beings. If you cut us, we bleed. If you beat us, we feel pain. If you poison us, we die. So they hurt. But that notwithstanding, in the sum total as a country, we are moving forward. And I seem, as I get older, to gain confidence that my grandchildren will inherit a better country than the country I was born in.
Dr. You've spoken so well about our country and the leaps that we've made as a nation. But internationally, where do you think now, after this election, the Supreme Court process, and now we have got president in waiting, of course, to be sworn in next week, on the face of the international community, where do you think Kenya stands right now?
The international community is advised to respect us. If it doesn't advise itself, we will advise it to respect us. The tempests of social and civic nature are everywhere in the world. There's no country that does not get itself subjected to shocks and tempests. And depending on the kinds of shock absorbers which are built in the law, in the social and political culture and behavior of that society, some will withstand, others will cave in to the pressures. You have seen that in the United Kingdom, for example, they are about to have a new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. She's expected to be inaugurated formally by the Queen. And you have seen that they have been going through turbulence from Theresa May to Boris Johnson,
who is now exiting.
And then they have Liz Truss, who is coming. And meanwhile, there have been demonstrations all over the United Kingdom. If we were to behave the way they do, we would have given travel advisories to African citizens in the United Kingdom, telling them don't go to this place, don't go to the other place, it is not safe for you. On the 6th of January 2020, we did not, 2021, we did not advise Kenyans in the United States to avoid going to Washington, D.C. And we know what happened there. We know that the United States is the foremost democracy in the world. But it has got its own shocks. It has got its own tempests. Every so often we hear of a gunman who has come around and done Hamey. And therefore, we must say that mayhem is something that will be potentially there in every society. But we have passed that test in a country where we are going to an election and everybody is afraid. We are showing that we have an electoral system, we have got processes. Those who are unhappy will go to seek redress elsewhere, and as they seek that redress, they can maybe not be quite in agreement. But when we have on the average outcomes such as we have had, then I think the international community should start looking at us as a role model.
Because Daktari, as we speak, Wakili was also in the Supreme Court representing a client, and of course you would imagine the kind of brains that we have, Wakili, because I'm told that Kenya exports even some of the legal brains to represent other clients in different jurisdictions, right?
Yes, we've had quite a number of us, my colleagues actually go out and represent clients. We have members of the bar in Kenya who are members of the ICC prosecution team who actually represent there in Netherlands. They represent members from here. And so as a country we are so rich. We're so rich, and if we have gotten to this place where we are respecting the systems and where the systems are also working, because we could respect systems which are not working, but we can see them working, although not at 100%.
But there's some signs.
There are signs that if we give the systems time, and time is able to determine a lot of things, but these systems will be able to actually help us in dealing with a lot of maybe even mischief, or dealing with a lot of gaps that we have in our leadership and in our spaces. And so there's so much progress that we're making as a democracy, so much progress we're making as a country. And it's just a matter of time, because as my senior here has said, Dr. Daktari has said here, the Constitution is only 12 years old. What will be of our Constitution in the next 50 years? Because it has set up structures which we are still introducing. There was something that came up during the hearing. One of the parties had raised an issue to do with that the disabled were not allowed to vote, and the people in the hospitals are not allowed to vote. It is there in our Elections Act, only that it has not been implemented. And so what happens, what becomes of our democracy once we are able to implement some of these things? Because it's through time that then we are able to introduce some of these laws that allow maybe the sick in hospitals, allows an increase in people in the foreign countries to also participate in this process. And this year we had, I think we had quite a number of people, of Kenyans who live in Canada and in the UK, participate in the process of voting. So what becomes of our democracy in the next 50 years?
Yeah.
Because if we allow the systems, if we allow the constitution to take place and not be in a hurry to maybe even start changing it.
Absolutely.
If we allow it time, then we are going to reap from it.
That's right. What's your take?
I agree completely, particularly taking off where he has just left it off. The constitutional provisions may sometimes be uncomfortable. There may be some pain, and that pain and that discomfort is like the pain and discomfort of an injection that is going to treat you, that is going to cure you. And if we become short-termist and begin looking at the Constitution and the other legal instruments from the perspective that we want to enjoy.
Yeah, we want a quick fix.
Yeah, a quick fix. To feel nice today, and we start saying, let us remove this, let's bring in this one, relax it a little bit here.
Yeah.
Then we are loosening it. What we need to be doing is to be making it more compact, because we are a generation of builders. And those who build the house rarely live in it to enjoy the comforts of that house. They build it so that other people will live there and enjoy. And the people whom we are building this for are future generations. They must be able to look back 100 to 100 years from now and say that the founders of our republic were noble people. They did what was good for us. And I agree also that our academic and intellectual power are assets, and they are assets that we are going to export and market and sell fund-wide if we behave properly at home.
Daktari, it's all over and it's all systems go for Daktari Ruto. What do you think is now left for him?
For Dr. Ruto and the government that is now coming in, does Barrack repeat what I've usually said to those who have been there? I've had the privilege of living in this country now for many years.
Right.
I was born in the colonial days, so I lived under the colonial dispensation. I lived under President Kenyatta, President Moi, President Kibaki, President Uhuru, and now there is President William Ruto coming in. The refrain has always been nation building, but we have never interrogated that notion of nation building to really understand what it is. We don't think about nation building beyond physical edifices, beyond infrastructure. For example, if you go outside this studio, next a few meters away, you have a superhighway, which is a good thing, but that is not the nation. The nation are the people. When you bring together that national cohesiveness, that national integration, then you are building the nation. The incoming president is particularly challenged to build the nation. That feeling of oneness, the fellow feeling.
Like Ujamaa in Tanzania?
Yeah, to an extent, Ujamaa brings that, although it was more for a political, economic, ideological orientation, but it is within that direction.
Right.
What do I mean when I say that he is especially challenged. We have got one gentleman who has been elected by people from across the country, including from 2 communities that previously had not very pleasant encounter in the 2007 season. But there's a sense in which those communities have owned him the way communities have never owned anyone before. I think the only other person who was owned that way was President Uhuru Kenyatta. But President Uhuru Kenyatta was owned with a William Ruto input.
Yes.
William Ruto has been owned without a Uhuru Kenyatta input, and in spite of a strong wave of opposition from the president himself and those around him, he is challenged to hold that unanimity together and to bring other Kenyan communities within that unanimity and to show that he can be gracious and charitable in victory, and that Kenyans discover some level of coherence and integration, which then will give birth to the economic progress that the country yearns for as a factor of social and political stability.
Wakili, Dr. says that there's a huge challenge ahead of Dr. William Ruto, and of course the issue of cohesion. We are divided. I mean 47, 50 million people. You can imagine the kind of weight that is now over his shoulder to bring 7 million people and 6 million people who voted for other comes. I don't know what you think is going to be that magic rod that is going to use to bring the country together.
First of all, we have, from the register this year, we had 22 million registered voters.
Yes.
And out of the 22 million, only 14 million showed up. And out of the 14, only 7 voted for him. So it basically means that he only got a third out of the 22 million. Only a third of the people of this republic believed in him. And it's a sad affair. And what then that means is he needs to find out of the 22 million and only 14 that showed up, out of those, the gap that did not even turn up to vote, why didn't they turn up to vote? Is it that they do not believe in this republic?
That's a good point.
Is it that they do not want to participate in anything in this country? Is it that they are discouraged by the leadership? So there's something he needs to find out from there. Then there's a 6.9 who may not have voted for him. He needs to make sure that he is able to reach out to them and he makes them feel that he's also their president. So the person in Moyale who is watching us and Lodwar, who feels like he's in a different country, needs to feel that in the regime of incoming president, that he's also a Kenyan, that he can enjoy the benefits of being a Kenyan. And this is security, maybe for him out there in the northern part of the country. Enjoy the availability of food because there's a hunger going on in that part of the country. So President Ruto has different mandates for the different people in this country because he's a leader for all. He needs to get to that place whereby he's able to hear out the needs of each and every Kenyan in every region in this country. He's able to fulfill their needs. So someone out there may be security and somebody else in this country may need education, free education. Somebody else may need free health care. So they need to feel that he's a president for all. And the road that he needs to use basically is the magic road he needs to get might be one that is that one of being able to reach out to all the leaders in this country because he cannot be able to do much. So he might need to sit down with his competitor, Honorable Raila Odinga and Martha Karua, they may need to sit down and talk and take over this country and work together as leaders.
Dr. Even as you respond to that question as well, I asked him, do you think it's now over for Honorable Eliud? He's 77.
It's never over until it is over. And for living beings, it's over only when you go lateral and they send you 6 feet under. Then it is over. Therefore, it is not over.
Politically speaking,
I don't think so. His father passed on when he was 90-something, and he was a member of parliament representing Bondo. He was still politically active in the country. If I were to advise him, however, I would request him to consider investing political prowess in younger generations. Yes, you have noted I'm particularly passionate about new generations.
Yes.
And where they are going to take the country, the institutions, the entities, the political party should enjoy fresh blood, new people coming in. But allow me to comment a little bit on the question you asked about the magic wand and national cohesion, how people go forward. I don't agree with my friend Eliud Ngugi here that the fact that William Ruto has arrived at the center of power, being voted for by just about 50% of the electorate, or those who turned out to vote, or those whose votes were said to have been valid, that it's a sad affair, or that it's only 1/3 or whatever. Far from it. First, these things are built in constitutional entities. If we were talking of a president who has arrived through the barrel of the gun, I would say it is a sad affair. If we talked about a push, a coup d'etat, or something like that, I would say it is a sad affair. But we are talking about a dispensation in which people have exercised their democratic right.
Yes.
The right to stay at home is democratic. It's unlike other places where it is criminalized. If you do not go to vote, you can actually be prosecuted. If you've gone there and voted in a certain way and not in another way, it is a democratic right. So I think this is a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's not a sad thing. Now, going forward, I don't believe in tokenism, that now you must go and talk to Raila Odinga. You must now go and talk to Martha Karua. No, let them build their thing and let them be the government in waiting. Let them put this government on its toes. Let them wait for the opportunity. How then does William Ruto, that notwithstanding, take the country along?
Yes.
Kenyans must be reminded, and they must remind the incoming president, that he has spent a number of months going around the country signing economic charters with the various regions. This is where I agree with Ngugi, that the needs of different places may not necessarily be mirror images of those of other places. And I think those charters reflect that. And so this is the time to call the bluff, that you signed these charters.
Now get down to work.
You told us you're going to do this for us. You're going to set aside so much money for this and that.
Yeah.
You are with Mr. Mudavadi, who is now virtually Prime Minister and in charge of finance, the Treasury. You are with Mr. Wetangula, who is in charge of the National Assembly. You have got the numbers, you can legislate. We want to see you implementing these charters. And if these charters, because the worst thing in any society is the feeling of injustice. And the feeling of injustice comes out of exclusion. And we have had successive regimes in this country that have told us things like, you did not vote for us. Yeah. And therefore, we are not going to prioritize you in any way. That is what kickstarts the feeling of injustice, the feeling of being left out.
And marginalization.
Yeah. And the feeling that we are not part of it. And therefore, you begin incubating future violent thoughts and violent activities. These charters must not be found out eventually to have been signed in vain as election campaign gimmicks. The new government must give us a blueprint that shows how it is going to implement these charters while meeting its other financial obligations.
Wakili, on 13th of this month, that is on Thursday, the first sitting of both houses will happen, and that is where they will be sworn in and the real battle begins. Electing a speaker for both houses. We have got Kalonzo Musyoka, we have got Kenneth Marende, honorables, so to speak. We have got Senator Moses Wetangula. The real battle will begin at that particular point. What do you foresee on Thursday? We've seen dramas in both houses in the past.
What I expect on Thursday is, number one, the president-elect has not just been sitting down waiting for inauguration. He has actually been reaching out to the Azimio MPs.
Yes.
And I expect that, having reached out and actually showed that he's a leader for all, and having been elected, I believe that on that day, our honorable members of parliament are likely to vote for somebody associated with the president-elect as a speaker of parliament, both houses. And so it's going to be quite interesting to see how then after that the decisions are going to be made in that house when it comes to debating different issues. Because if you have a speaker and you may not or might have a majority, the gap is very small for the majority. And what happens is that when it comes to a bill that is being introduced in that house, then I believe there will be very robust kind of debates coming out of that house this time round, due to the numbers, and I expect quality kind of laws to also come out at a very fast rate, because if you have the numbers and you're able to convince quite a majority, then it means that any legislation that needs to be put in place will be done in quite a fast way and in quality way, because also the kind of members of parliament that we have elected this time round, I believe, are also quality. We have new blood, we have new members of parliament who are very educated and are able to actually debate some of those issues. So it's going to be quite an interesting house to watch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just a point of correction. I said 13th. 13th will be the swearing in.
The swearing in.
Yes. It will be on Thursday, Thursday, the 8th of this month. So I beg pardon for that one. So, Dr. A big battle. We have got Speaker Marende battling it out with Moses Wetangula. A big battle from two bulls from Western Kenya, so to speak.
I think Marende is coming on board as a spoiler. Kenneth,
but he was promised then.
Kenneth Otiato Marende is coming on board as a spoiler, and he will not be able to spoil, unfortunately. Marende was, until January this year, working in tandem with Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula. Then on the day of the earthquake, You remember the earthquake on the 23rd of January at Bomas. He decamped, and Mudavadi was the one who decamped actually, so to speak, because he left the One Kenya formation and found himself in the same corner with William Ruto. Apparently, dialogue had been ongoing behind the scenes, and it is possible that people like Marende may not have been fully appraised of what was happening. He went ballistic after that, verbally, so to speak, and accused Mudavadi of making wrong choices. That this man is always making the wrong choices. But this is the one time when it turns out that Mudavadi and Wetangula made the right choice. They looked in the crystal ball. They understood that they were beginning a little too late. Ruto had bolted and he was ahead, and there was every likelihood he was going to be the next president. As Eliud Ngugi correctly observes, Ruto has not been sleeping in the period between the 15th of last month and now. He has been busy massing up troops, mobilizing troops. And of course you understand that their thresholds, I think the voting in round one would require an outright winner who gets 2/3 of the votes. I don't think that will happen, and they're likely now to go to subsequent voting, where the top two, the person who gets more than 50% will become the speaker. There may be 2 candidates, or there may be more, but I still think it will be more than 1 round of voting. Because if there are 2 and they vote round 1, you get 50% plus 1. I get 40-something%. Then we are subjected to a repeat. In that repeat, even if you get the same and I get the same, that is a new round. The one with the higher number of votes becomes the speaker. And I think all indications are that it's going to be Moses Wetangula.
All right.
Marende comes on board as a spoiler.
I'm told that we don't need to spoil the show because we are already a minute past the hour, and that is where we need to stop it. And the way we say, mambo ni meme lakini masani machache in the streets. Thank you so much. That is Daktari Barrack Muluka, Strategic Communications and Advisor, as well as Eliud Ngugi, who is an advocate of the High Court. We've had, plenty to talk about. And conversation will still continue, and gentlemen promise that you will come back to the show.
Indeed.
We still have got so much to cover.
Invited, I certainly intend to come. This is home.
This is home. Asante sana. All right, that is where we wrap it up on Good Morning Kenya. Thank you so much for being a part of the show, the entire crew and my colleagues, Jen, Doreen, and Regina. Let's meet tomorrow. Have a good morning. Bye-bye.